Happy Sunday night. It's a little bit of a different conversation we're going to have here tonight. I want to talk to you about your health. I want to talk to you about food. I want to talk to you about food for your body and also food in terms of growing it and what it's doing to the planet, the way we grow it now. Huge conversation, certainly starting with your health. In this age of COVID, nothing could be more important than that you be healthy, that you see how you eat and how you exercise and how you treat your body as the greatest preventative measure in terms of COVID and other disease, how to help you heal if you have disease, and also if you have had it, COVID or anything else, how you stay healthy and don't get it again. So I just happen to know somebody who has the best things in the world to say about this. Someone who has been an old friend of mine, someone who I first met back in the 90s when he was just a youngin'. And he's meant so much to me in my life. And he has been so helpful to me. And he's one of those people that I go to for help, for sustenance, whether it has to do with politics, whether it has to do with food, whether it has to do with nutrition, whether it has to do with lifestyle. He's just this incredible encyclopedia of information, plus as nice a human being as you could possibly imagine. Well, he's been writing a book for a while and now it's out and it is as fantastic as I expected it to be. And I'm excited to share with you what's in this book and also its author, my friend Matthew Albracht, who has written this wonderful book. It is called Nourish Your Self Whole. Matthew, hi honey, how are you? We can't hear you. I don't know if you need to unmute yourself or.
I'm sorry.
Hi,
Thank you.
how are
Thank
you?
you. Good. Thank you. I'm really excited and humbled and thank you for the kind words.
Well, the book
You've
is already,
obviously,
I'm sorry.
I'm just saying like back at you because you changed my life. I mean, in so many profound ways, from your teachings to just my direct relationship with you. It's just been
You're
an honor to be on this journey with you in life.
right back at you, Matthew. You're the little brother I never had. So you are my little brother. The book is great. It's already out there. It's already making waves. Nourish Your Self Whole. So let's get right into it. First of all, it's interesting to me what you wrote about in the introduction about why you wrote the book, how you wanted to present to people in simpler terms the things that they need to know. And then there are these 4 pillars. That's really what the book is about, guys. It's that there are 4 pillars that you need to know in terms of eating right, in terms of living a healthier life, particularly in relation to your food. So Matthew, go at it. Why do you write the book? And tell us about the 4 pillars.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Well, I think first it started with my journey over my adult life. I think a lot of my health kept evolving. I kept feeling all kinds of challenges, from creaky joints and back to skin issues. And I was getting tired all the time, to the point where I sometimes just felt like I couldn't stay awake in the afternoon when I was working. Brain fog, horrible brain fog that was, I just felt like I was trying to wade through fog in my life. A lot of other stuff that was, as I was aging, I just kept feeling this sense of like, gosh, this isn't going to be fun going forward. And I'd always been conscious of food, very aware and paying attention, or at least I thought I was. But in 2015, I made a big shift and I just dove in. I made a commitment to myself and dove in. And at the end of it, I must say I was shocked at how much better I felt. I didn't really realize the level that just dietary changes could impact my life and my health and my well-being. And so I got excited and I dove in. I started training as a coach, even though, as you know, my background is social change and activism, which I still do full on and don't ever want to give up.
Matthew, let me interrupt just a moment for all of you to know. Matthew and I really, in essence, co-founded an organization called the Peace Alliance. So he is major in the field of peace building. So this food thing is just in addition to other wonderful things that he does.
Yeah. It's all connected. It's funny. I want to read some quotes and it'll help contextualize what's going on. So where I have the quotes. Well, I'll remember them. So today, 60% of Americans have one chronic disease and 40% have 2 or more chronic diseases. In 10 years, at the current trajectory, if nothing changes, 83 million Americans will have 3 or more chronic diseases. Now, this is compared to about 30 million in 2015. Also, 70% of Americans are either overweight or obese. 40% are obese. And that's up from 3% in 1962. So that's a tremendous challenge. So I share that because what's happening to all of us individually and collectively is it's a dark path forward. If we continue on this trajectory, it's gonna cost all of us with our lives and our livelihood and our relationships, but it's going to cost us financially. It's going to cost our healthcare system. It already is tremendously. We won't be able to keep up with that. And so I started seeing, between my activism and this change in my life, I saw this interconnection and I just got so excited. I mean, really, I wanted people to feel as good as I felt making the changes. It was just such a beautiful change. And also to realize that I say this phrase, healthy eating doesn't have to hurt. You can have rich, delicious, incredible, filling foods and still eat well. It's not just, so many people, I think I did too, think it's like, carrot sticks and celery sticks to be healthy. And it's not. It's really rich, amazing food. You just have to know where to target and where to pull things away. And so I wrote it because a lot of the diets and diet books out there are really targeting kind of a purist ideal approach. And the reality is that too many people are just miles and miles from that ideal. And so I wrote it with the people that I love in mind and myself. Just, I wanted to meet people where they were at, to where you could, if you want to dive deep, there's plenty of good information in there. And if you want to baby step in, you'll have information and you'll arm yourself with the information to decide where you want to start and where you want to go. And you can lean into that and not try to blow it out and fail and then,
Right.
drop out of this kind of work.
So that, to me, is the best thing about this book. A lot of times when it comes to healthy eating and all of the things that have to do with that whole conversation today, it seems complicated. And what's really good about this book is its simplicity. And it, as Matthew just said, it meets you where you are. And that's what's very special about this book, Matthew. You keep it simple.
Thank you. Thank you.
You make it available to people, the deeper information if they want it. You give people resources if they want to go deeper, but you give it the simplicity. Just remember these things, which are those 4 pillars. So I got what you were just saying. Now tell us, what are the pillars? Sure.
Yeah. So there's 4 key pillars. The first one is, I call it the foundational pillar. These are there are many pillars to good health, but these are the ones that, in all my research over years and everything I've done in all my training, these are the 4 that I think are the most highly leveraged to give you food. In terms of food, right? Highly leveraged in terms of diet to give you the biggest bang for your buck for time and energy in terms of cultivating vibrant health.
Okay.
So I focused in on these 4 in particular, and there's more stuff in the book too about other things, but these were the big things. So the first one, which I call the foundational pillar, is to eat a whole foods diet, which of course we hear a lot about. It's so important. If you did one thing with your health, it would be to adopt a whole foods diet. And that means eating as close to the root source as possible. The processed foods and the hyper palatable foods that are lining most of our grocery store shelves, they call it hyper palatable because they literally design these foods to kind of explode on your tongue like a nuclear explosion. But it does to your body what it does to your tongue. It's just, these are things that we did not evolve eating this kind of food for the tens of thousands and millions of years we were evolving. We ate whole food sources, and our bodies weren't designed to handle this assault from so many. We get environmental assaults, we get stress, we get all these things that are attacking our body, and we have to address all of them. But food in particular, like, you're putting it directly in your mouth. And so
just to simplify, that's the chemical additives.
Right.
That's all the processed food. And at one point you talk about how if there over 5 things on the label, particularly if there are things that you can't pronounce, probably not a good idea.
It was so funny because I put a list of those things in the book so people could just have a sense of what they need to deliver. And I didn't think of that when I wrote it. And then I did the audiobook and I had to pronounce them, and I couldn't do it. I mean, I just fumbled my way through it. But these aren't things that we ate, and the skyrocketing disease rates we were talking about are directly tied to processed foods. And when I say processed foods, I mean things like refined white flours, most fresh or frozen baked goods, most snack foods like packaged chips and cookies and crackers and candies, flavored sugary sodas, fast food, obviously, any of the thing. When you think about whole foods, when you go to the grocery store, the whole middle of the grocery store is mostly processed foods. Then what's along the edges and the perimeters, that's where your whole foods are. You think about vegetables and
Really?
things, there's no full food. So if you think about, you want to spend you
Yeah,
want
you're
your
right.
grocery cart to be mostly full of the things on the perimeter,
Yeah, that's right.
and the center you got to be
That's where
careful
the
with.
fruits are and the vegetables and the,
Exactly, dairy, meats, there's all, it's the whole foods. There's baked goods too, usually on the edge, and we got to be careful with that. We'll talk about that in a minute. But that's essentially what we're talking about. If there, as you said, if there's more than 5 ingredients on the label, that's probably not a good sign to dive in. So that's what I call the foundational pillar, because pretty much there's broad agreement that whole foods diet is a much healthier diet. And then pillar 2 is reduce sugar and refined carbs. I think a lot of people have also probably heard that rampant inflammation is a really disease creator. It's kind of kindling for disease in your body. Inflammation is good when we get hurt. It's doing its job to protect us. But when it runs rampant, it creates all kinds of disease, heart disease, diabetes, autoimmune diseases, cancer, et cetera. That's one of the main drivers of disease. And sugars and refined carbs and in that category create constant inflammation in the body. They're just highly inflammatory. And they're also very addictive. They trigger dopamine receptors in the brain to make you, it's been shown to be as addictive as crack in terms of the ability for people to get on it. And so, one of the other stats that's horrifying is that our sugar consumption in America, including refined carbs, is about 152 pounds a year for the average American. And it was about 2 pounds 150 to 200 years ago. So you could see evolving as our bodies sort of adjusted. We didn't have that kind of stuff, and it's done a lot of damage to our health. And of course, they put so much of this stuff in foods because it's shelf stable, it's relatively cheap, easy to mass produce, and it's very addictive. So that's
in terms of it being very addictive. I think, it is said that most people, I would be one of those people actually, gained weight during COVID. And I think that's one of the reasons is because of all the anxiety around it and not going out and doing the things we normally do. A lot of those addictive foods are what we call the comfort foods.
Yeah.
And I know, and I saw how it went for me that, oh, well, this isn't going to last very long. So, let yourself have this or that.
Well, it's true.
Normally let yourself have, and then, 6 months later, I was still letting myself. And yeah,
it's true. It kept going. It did for me too. One of the exciting things about this particular area, it's the scariest for most people. When I talk about reduced refined carbs and sugar, people are like, oh God, that's going to be hard. I found so many fantastic alternatives. I'm not saying they're like 100% health food, but there's such better alternatives. And I put a lot in the book and on my website. Well, if you look at things like, let me first just say this. So one of the reasons they're bad is because sugar and carbs turn into one of the main sources of fuel for your body, which is called glucose. Yeah. And glucose is important. We need it, but too much of it, insulin is a hormone that regulates glucose in our body. Mm-hmm. And when we get too much glucose constantly flooding our body, we get insulin resistant because it can't keep up with, to make it simple, it can't keep up with the load. So when we eat a lot of sugar and carbs, you get this problem. It can not only create diabetes, it's this inflammatory process, like I said. But what happens when you eat things that are called lower glycemic, which is the level at which it breaks down, the sugar breaks down in your body, the insulin can handle it better and your body can handle it better. So there are things like, for example, if I want a chocolate chip cookie or a zucchini bread or a banana bread, ask me why I'm saying those 3 things, because during COVID, I had a lot of them. I used either things like almond flour, or cassava flour, which is from the yucca root. Those are my 2 favorites. You can use coconut flour. Those are the 3 kind of big ones. There's a few others that are lower glycemic. And in fact, cassava flour doesn't even spike your blood sugar very much at all. And I make them for friends and family all the time. And people, they don't even know, like they can't tell it's something different. So, and I put, I might use maple syrup or something that's a little bit less glycemic, or coconut sugar.
I
Go
want to
ahead.
say something here, guys. There's a lot of conversation all over social media, and for good reason, about the terribly high cost of insulin in the United States compared to other countries, and how there are people who die because they can't afford their insulin, and how absolutely immoral that is. And my mother died of diabetes. There's a lot of diabetes in my family. Um, So I'm very aware of the issue of diabetes. But when we talk about insulin and insulin being so expensive in the United States, we also have to address why so many people need insulin in the United States,
Yeah.
why there is such a high rate of diabetes. One of the things I talked about when I was running, of course, was how we don't have just have a healthcare system, we have a sickness care system. What we really need to deal with is why Americans have such a high rate of chronic illness compared to the citizens of other countries. Things like chronic heart disease, things like diabetes, things like asthma, of course, obesity. And a lot of it has to do with these additives, with these chemical foods, with the addiction to sugar, et cetera. So everything that Matthew
Absolutely.
is talking about here tonight, this is so far from cosmetic. This is really serious. And so when he's talking about the issues with insulin, we can't just talk about how to pay for your insulin. We're talking about not so many people should need insulin.
Absolutely. And one of the
Excellent.
really encouraged, type 1 diabetes is a different story, but type 2 diabetes, which is what most people, have and need insulin for, is largely reversible. When I was studying functional medicine and functional nutrition and people like Mark Hyman, I started to learn the science that, just with simple dietary changes, people can actually fully get off of insulin, both shots and pill form, and reverse diabetes. So we can do this, but as you said, you've said this a lot. Our doctors, if they're lucky, they get one nutrition class when they go through the entire medical school.
Yeah.
We provide no resources. You called for this in the presidential campaign, that we give resources for people and for medical systems to actually coach people. People don't know what they can do. It's hard to do, in part, I think, because they literally don't know what to do, and they don't know about the fun alternatives where you can still enjoy life and have things that taste delicious if you have the resources to do it. Plus, I don't know how we should really get into the fact that we subsidize the foods that are
We
the most
absolutely
toxic
should.
for our health,
Well,
and
yeah,
not the
like,
things that are the best.
yeah, corn syrup, corn syrup, et cetera. So
Yeah.
let's go back a little bit. So my mother's generation, they assumed that the food they were feeding to their families was healthy. They assumed that because in that time there were not all these additives. This was when all that was starting, all the chemicals, all the additives. There was also this naive assumption that the government would be taking care of you, and that there would be government agencies that would make sure that the unhealthy stuff couldn't make it into your food. Whereas today, as Matthew just mentioned, because of the nefarious influence of money on our system, we have these huge corporate entities. And just as if you might have heard my podcast with Dr. Mark Hyman, who Matthew just referred to, in his wonderful book, Food Fix, all of his wonderful books, you can hear that podcast as well. What started to happen, of course, is that there's just basically a few food companies. So you have a few food companies, a few chemical companies, and also let's put in big ag. So much money is made by poisoning us, basically.
Exactly.
I'm not saying anybody gets up in the morning and says, let's poison people,
No.
but they're not waking up in the morning saying, let's make sure we don't. And
Right.
this has to do with slow moving accumulated layers of toxicity in the body, which absolutely do lead to chronic illness. And at this point, what's necessary is that we ourselves become educated. That's why books like Matthew's are so important. And also that we become educated so that we start demanding of our politicians that so many of these foods, which, by the way, a lot of these chemicals are not allowed in the food in certain European countries and other countries.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're Chinese, so interesting about the Chinese. The Chinese have bought companies that produce GMOs, but they themselves won't allow them.
Right.
So there are many things where in other countries you can assume that your food is safer and healthier because they are not as influenced by the short-term profit maximization as motivation. The motivation, of course, should be healthy food. So this is why books like this exist. Let me make sure I take a moment to remind you this beautiful book, Nourish Your Self Whole. Okay, so you were just talking about the reduced sugar, refined carbs, white flour. Pillar 3 is the good fats and the bad fats, which
Right, right.
a lot of us are
Eat,
confused
eat
about.
good fats, ditch bad fats. You know,
Okay.
my generation, I grew up in the 80s and the 90s hearing that fat was essentially evil, that we should dodge it. There was the low fat craze. They switched, they started this in the 1960s, but they switched to these industrial seed vegetable oils, which are actually the really big culprit for a lot of problems. But the evidence is really clear now that good fat is crucial to thriving health. And recently, as I think it was 2015, the USDA even upped the amount of fat that it was requiring for us in the food pyramid. So the research is now showing that good heart healthy fats are so important to our flourishing. You know, the Mediterranean countries who eat a lot of, for example, olives and olive oils have much lower rates of disease than we do in the West.
Wow.
So, you know, the evidence is there. Healthy fats do a lot of good things for the body. They actually lower your risk for heart disease and stroke. They can reduce unwanted inflammation and blood pressure. They can decrease the bad LDL cholesterol and increase the good HDL cholesterol. There's so many systems in the body that it helps. Go ahead.
So where do you get the good fats?
Well, good fats are, I'll read you the list of the good fats and the bad fats. So expeller pressed oils, which means they're using just force to get the oils out of the, for example, olives or avocados, are what you always want to look for. And we're talking olive, avocado, whole or in oil form, nuts and seeds. Let me grab my list so I don't lose any of them.
While you're doing that, I just want to say a pitch. I'm sure you know this, but just in case there's anybody who doesn't, stay away from those low-fat drinks. Stay away from the low-fat soda. Aspartame is terrible for you. It should not be sold legally. Splenda.
It is. Again, processed foods. There's a lot of research. I have on my bibliography, for the book, I list some good studies on why those in particular are bad. So you're so right on. Really toxic. And a lot of times when things say low fat, by the way, they instead of the fat, they replaced it with the sugar, which is why, again, our health declined.
And also one of the things that they do that Mark Hyman talks about when they say artificial flavors, it's kind of like how in the environmental movement, the greenwashing that they talk about, like they have figured out, a lot of these fossil fuel companies and stuff, they've figured out that people want to be environmentally safe. So they come up with ways to promote things as though it sounds environmentally correct, but it's really not. So they all know that everybody, so the food companies and the chemical companies now know that everybody wants to be safe. So they come up with things like natural flavors. And then you look at all the chemicals and what they call natural flavors. Okay, go on. You're talking about good fats.
So good fats. So we're talking olives, avocado, coconut oil is really good. It gets a little bad rap because it has saturated fat, but saturated fats are really important. It literally holds all of our cells together. We need some of it.
The very image, it holds the cells together. Certainly better than their.
Yeah, exactly. Things like palm oil, but only sustainably sourced palm oil because it's a problem for the ecology, but you can find sustainably sourced. If you're not, nuts and seeds are a good source of variety, including omega-3 fats, which are really important.
Which nuts and seeds are you particularly fond of for this purpose?
Well, they're all great. My personal favorite, have my personal favorites. I love pumpkin seeds and pumpkin seeds and sunflower seeds are my two favorites. Almonds are great. Macadamia nuts are really fantastic oil, and they taste good too. I get my nuts and seeds, by the way, raw and sprouted for a bunch of reasons I spell out in the book. It's probably a little too in the weeds for tonight, but it just the oils in nuts and seeds easily become rancid and oxidized, which I should talk a little bit about. But it's okay; they're still really healthy. Don't sweat it too much. Even getting them, the good outweighs the bad. But I just happen to get mine raw and sprouted. So, and if you're not vegan, there's things like, especially for fats, grass-fed and pasture-raised animals are the best because they, when you eat grain, it's just troubling for the fat, not for the protein. The protein's fine no matter what. But things like tallow and lard and butter and ghee and full-fat dairy for people who do that are fine too. Then, in terms of the bad oils, so this is so important. I want to say just a little bit about why they're bad before I give you the list. Oxidation is one of the most troubling things that can happen to our health. Oxidation is sort of like, if you think of when a banana turns brown, that's what happens to oils that can't handle air and heat and or are processed and have oxidation from the beginning. And rampant oxidation in the body is basically, I'll simplify this, creates free radicals in the body. And we hear a lot about free radicals as a cause for cancer. What they do is we have them we have free radicals in our body all the time, but when you get far too many, they can start to form cancer cells and start to form tumors, as one example. And so when you get too much oxidation from your foods, it sort of becomes like rust inside your body. So it's really problematic. And with these industrial seed vegetable oils that I'm going to run through in a minute, which, by the way, were never in existence before about 100 years ago in the early 1900s. They were used for car manufacturing and oiling and lubricating cars. And food manufacturers figured out that they could produce it much more cheaply than the whole food-based fats, and they were much more shelf stable for these processed foods that sit on the shelves. And we switched everything over from the 1960s on to these industrial seed oils. And that's where we've seen, toxic disease rates skyrocket. So these are things that we hear that these are good, and they're not. Canola, soy, corn, safflower, sunflower, cottonseed, grapeseed, margarine,
all those oils are bad?
Yes, you want to avoid them at all costs. Like there's nothing more important you could do. And if you look at your labels for salad dressings, for just about any kind of food that's pre-made that has oil, that's typically what they're going to use. So you gotta dodge it. The good news is there's a lot of cool companies now making food like salad dressings out of avocado oil, 100% avocado oil. And you'll see some things like on the shelves that say olive oil, but look at the label because it says canola oil first, then sunflower, and then olive oil third. But they market it like olive oil.
Stay away from canola oil and stay away from sunflower.
Yeah, especially the processed ones. So they are oxidized just from the way they're chemically processed. I said the expeller pressed for the others. For oils that are chemically processed, first you're having these toxic chemicals that they use to pull the oil out of the seeds, and then they're oxidized, and then they sit on the shelf and oxidize. And the worst of the worst with these oils is fried foods, because not only are they already oxidized, when you heat them up like that, they get rampant oxidization, and they can use that same oil to fry your foods, like at a restaurant, for example, for almost a week. And so if you happen to hit the 6th day and you get that oil, like it's not just long-term sickness, you immediately are going to have an impact on your body with this stuff. So like this, I feel evangelical about. Like this is one of the most important things you can do. But again, the good news is you don't have to not have fat in your diet. You just have to swap it out.
The right fat.
When you learn, right, with the right fat. So when you learn how to do it, you're not losing out. And in fact, I've shifted my caloric intake away from carbohydrates, like simple carbohydrates. There's complex good carbohydrates, by the way, in like vegetables and root vegetables. And so not all carbs are bad, but these simple refined carbohydrates, I've shifted away from that as my calorie source towards more heart healthy fat or body healthy fat. And you're
making me afraid to eat, which is kind of a good thing. I'd like to lose my, I'm listening to you, I'm like,
okay, let me say this to you. Let me say this to you and everybody else. I went radically hardcore when I first started my diet, and I did a high fat, low carb diet. And I'm talking 120 grams of fat a day, which I don't know if people know what that's a lot. That would be like 13 tablespoons of olive oil in one day. For example, just as a comparison, I believe that I might have the math wrong. A tablespoon is 13 grams, so people can do the math. I'm not that good at it. But this shocked me. I had no idea. I lost 25 pounds in about 6 weeks. And I was eating really rich, decadent food. It was just, again, shifting towards fat. Fat's a much more long, sustained energy. You get more energy from it. It's a better calorie burn for the buck in terms of your body. And as you start to shift away, you start to need to eat a little bit less. Even though I am a hearty eater, I never think about how much food I'm eating. And I've maintained this for 6 years now. So, everybody is different and everybody is a different body. But in general, fat is probably a much better way for us to be getting our energy than, for example, carbs. And so I know it scares people.
Wait, you tend to, you told me before we went on, you said, stop. Every once in a while, give me a minute to get in here. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Remember, everybody, the name of the book is Nourish Your Self Whole. Okay. Pillar 4,
Pillar
Indulge in a
4.
rainbow of vegetables and fruits. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So fruit and vegetables are full of micronutrients, vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, phytonutrients. They have fiber. They have energy. They have carbs for energy. And they do a whole host of things in the body. We hear a lot about, how good vegetables and fruit are. I think this is probably the least rocket science for people. But so I don't think I need to get too much into this stuff, but I will say that more than a third of our population is deficient in basic vitamins and minerals. And a lot of people think it's closer to half of our population. And when you don't have that kind of stuff in your body to do the work that they need to do, it's a real detriment to health. I talked about oxidation and free radicals a few minutes ago. One of the cool things about vegetables and fruit is that the phytonutrients and the antioxidants in particular, they literally are the antidote to that. So what they do, antioxidants go and they grab these oxidized elements in your body and they shuffle them out, amidst all the other things that the vitamins and minerals do, which is kind of indescribable.
I'm sort of obsessed with pomegranate seeds. They have something in them or something, because I figure that my body must want them for some reason.
I love that idea because I think it's true. First of all, I know how you eat, and you eat a relatively healthy diet. When you are eating a healthy diet, I think your body really speaks to you for what you need. And if you pay attention to it, so the colors of the rainbow of the vegetables, the reason I put rainbow of vegetables is all of those colors that come from the phytonutrients, they all do have different benefits for your body. And so that beautiful purple from the pomegranate seeds, which is, by the way, a very nutrient rich fruit. And also it's a bit lower, like juices are a different story. Juices do nothing but turn to sugar, unfortunately, right away when they're processed. So that I urge people to shy away from. But the whole pomegranate seeds, your body might be asking for that. I think we can tune in to what we need when we.
Yeah, there are periods where all I want to do is eat green grapes. Other periods when I've been obsessed with blueberries, and right now I'm obsessed with pomegranate seeds. But you say in the book only 2 helpings of fruit a day.
Yeah, in general. So fruit is sugar. When we talked about sugar and what it can do, so there's a lot of factors that it depends on. Like some people are, if you're a triathlete or if you do a lot of physical activity, that might be different. You need a little more glucose in your diet. If you have zero history of diabetes or blood sugar issues, you could probably have a little bit more. But it just depends. I mean, in general, though, it's better to get all of these nutrients from vegetables, like weight those heavier. I always say like 6 to 10 servings a day, which for a lot of people is like, it's a lot. But, I have a big, giant, colorful salad every day for lunch. I mean, full of stuff, full of nice, hearty fats that are healthy and a good protein source and seeds and nuts and carrots and, zucchini and just all kinds of fun stuff. And I get quite a few just from that salad, and it's really satisfying and nourishing for the day.
If I lived in the same area as you, you're in Oakland, of course. I'm in DC. Otherwise, I'd come over to your house for lunch every day. You also talk in the book about how all of us need to drink more water. And
absolutely. Most people are at least mildly dehydrated. So it's really important that we hydrate ourselves. And it's such a life force. We are mostly made up of water. Yeah. So the kind of space between all of our cells, this is all like liquidy stuff, blood, obviously. So it's really important that we hydrate. And one of the best ways well, first of all, just drink more water. It's most likely not going to hurt you. There are very few people who are going to overdrink water. One can do that, but it's like gallons a day or something to overdo it. But you can you can just wait until you're thirsty, but then you need to get plenty of water. You can look at your urine color, and if it's too dark, then that means you're dehydrated for the most part, unless you take a lot of vitamins.
You also talk about trying to stay away from plastics and have it in glass bottles.
Absolutely. I have a whole big section in the book on, because I feel so passionately about it, about the chemicals that get into our body from things, plastic bottles, water bottles, and plastic products. I use glass storage for my food. I use Pyrex glass because those things constantly are leaching plasticides and plastic chemicals into your food or your liquid. Think about those water bottles, the plastic water bottles. They ship them from, let's say, Georgia to DC, right?
And also
in the middle of the
hot,
summer.
When they're in your car hot,
They
they're
leach
drinking.
even more in the heat. I buy glass water bottles that have a silicone wrap because I don't want them to break, or you can use metal too. But I bring water around with these cool glass bottles. I have like 6 of them and rotate through them and just fill up with water and take it with me. It's better for the earth too. Our oceans are being destroyed from these little microplastic particles from all of the stuff breaking down in the ocean, and animals are getting really sick. They're getting as sick as we are. But I put a lot of these sort of cleaning up our personal care products and what we take into our body outside of food in the book, because it's important.
I remember years ago, you being at my house when I was in Michigan, I think, and you got rid of all my cleaning products.
Oh, good.
This is
Yes.
terrible, and that's terrible, that's terrible. And then you made me buy these, and I would complain to you, but they don't clean as well. And you said, too bad, just do it more.
I know they
And
do now. I mean, there's really
yeah,
good
they've
ones
gotten
now
better.
that clean
Have
great.
gotten better. All right. So obviously, I think it's clear to everyone the wealth of information that's in this book. But before I let you go, Matthew, you also talk about lifestyle issues. You talk about
Mhm.
stress reduction. You talk about mindfulness. You talk about as you say in the title, nourish yourself whole, your whole self.
Yeah.
So what do you have to say about things that are not food that you want to make sure people get in?
Well, all of what you said, I think, as your whole career attests, like what happens in our psyche and our spirit is so critical. There's so much that can go right and wrong with what's going on in our brain and in our psyche. And so to tend to that is just as, these are all pillars of good health.
Right.
Most of the book is around nutrition because it was just what I needed to write, but I put a lot of resources in for, from like obvious things like therapy people can get involved with, and resources and how to find a good therapist, things on getting coaches to help you work through issues, fun stuff like breath work and yoga and meditation and mindfulness practices and what I did was I didn't go I didn't write book length stuff on this stuff, but I gave you enough information to start with and a lot of good links to great resources. Obviously, I put your books in around some of those issues, but a lot of other people and apps and things that people can start to utilize to really repair and heal, because it takes everything. It's all interconnected and important.
As I said before, that's the power of this book. It's just enough to be able to digest, just enough that you're not overwhelmed by the information. And the other thing that Matthew does here, as does Mark Hyman and others, is to really make the connection between the health of the food that we eat, the health of the planet, the environment, the animals, and even the health of our democracy. Because if our democracy was healthier, none of this would be happening the way it is. So we're entering a season of repair. We're a society in decline. Our bodies are in decline, our health is in decline, our environment is in decline, our democracy is in decline. And we have to now break that, and we have to move into an incline now. We have to repair that which has been broken. And as Matthew said at the very, very beginning this evening, we're in a terrible, it's a road to sickness and death on so many levels if we don't, if not for us and for our children, for our planet, for our children's children. But I think people like yourself, who in any given area can break it down, make it bite-sized, connect the dots, make it so that, yes, I can see myself actually making these changes in my life. These books are they're like gold. This is so important. So Nourish Your Self Whole by this extraordinary wise man, Matthew Albracht. Anything else on the book that you want to add, Matthew, before I let you go?
Well, I just want to piggyback off what you said, which is so important in that, like, there's so much, I can attest to it personally. Like my mood, everything about my being changed when I changed my diet and improved tremendously in ways I had no idea. So yes, there's a lot of issues and challenges and frustrations, but take it on where you're at. Go ahead.
Mark Hyman talks a lot about that in terms of depression, the role of food in depression, the role of food in anxiety, the role of food in so many of the mood issues that people have. He talked about these extraordinary changes that have occurred among violent populations in prison just by changing the diets. And one of the things that is really I've read quite a bit about is children in public schools in France. And when you look at the food that they're given to eat in public schools, and then people ask, why don't they have ADD there? Why aren't they dealing with ADHD there?
It's true.
And the extraordinarily lower rate of those things in schools, in the children there, the school children there, and then you look at what they eat.
It's true.
Because
And the
they-
research backs it up. There's a whole field of nutritional psychiatry now, which is like, that's a good
That's right.
evolution for psychiatry.
I was reading an article the other day about how we think of cafeteria school, food at school as so bad, but the truth of the matter is, it said in many cases, it's the healthiest food that a child will have all day.
Yeah.
That's not good news, everybody. No. It's not good news. It's really a passive form of oppression. If you ask me, how many American children are, their needs are neglected, and neglecting their nutritional needs is a terrible, terrible damage, which we then pay for as a society. There's no doubt about it.
Absolutely. So yeah, the last thing I'll say is, no matter where you're at with your health and your ability and desire to make changes, whether you want to dive in deep and really, really just change it all, which is kind of my personality type, or if you just need to baby step into it, it's okay. It's like, take what you can do. And just, if you're eating 7 servings of carbs a day, try 6, do it for a few weeks, then take another one down. It's like people can do this. And I hope that people will, because I know what an amazing life experience you can have, both in enjoyment of food and just in feeling better inside your body. It's so clarifying. It allows so much more space for love and vibrance and creativity when your body has what it needs to do its basic functioning correctly. So it's such a gift to yourself, and it's a gift to the planet to do this kind of stuff. And one more thing, just crass salesmanship. My book's only available on Amazon, and they haven't loaded it in yet, or it's not in their algorithm yet. So go to my website, nourishyourselfwhole.com/book, and you can get to the Amazon site with the book.
God bless you, Matthew. Thank you for
Yeah.
everything you have been
Thank
to me.
you.
And thank you for all the things that you are to the world now. Actually, if you've ever gotten anything from any of my books, it's probably part of what you're liking.
It is. I can't even tell you how much I'm writing something. I'm going, this is sort of like what Marianne would say, but whatever.
Well,
you trained me.
Yeah, or I think it goes the other way too. A lot of what's in my books are things that Matthew taught me. Yeah. Much love to you, Matthew.
Thank you. Love you. So appreciate it.
Sounds a little, I don't want to say I'm proud of you, but I'm proud. I love you very much. I
appreciate that.
Everybody, thank you for being with us. I think this is a great conversation for a Sunday night, and it's an important conversation for all of our lives. So nourishyourselfwhole.com, Matthew.
Right.
And the gentleman's name is Matthew Albracht. And we need to be healthy for the path ahead. God bless you. And I want to thank Wendy Zoller. I want to thank Helen Caddis for setting us up and setting us up technologically so we could be with you tonight. Tell Rob I said hi. And much love to all of you. Have a beautiful evening. Thank you.